In the cold, endless void of space, where stars flickered like distant candles, a small alien exploration vessel drifted silently. It belonged to the Krillith Collective, a species known for their curiosity and advanced technology. Their mission was simple: explore uncharted regions of the galaxy, cataloging anything unusual they encountered. But today their scanners picked up something extraordinary: a derelict ship, floating lifelessly in the darkness. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Krillith vessel. Its metallic hull gleamed faintly under the light of a nearby star, though it bore deep scars from battles long past. Craters marred its surface, and parts of its structure were charred black, evidence of intense energy weapons. To the Krillith crew, it looked both menacing and mysterious. They had never seen a design like this before. Whoever built it was clearly not one of the known galactic civilizations. Captain Valus, the leader of the Krillith team, studied the readings on his console with furrowed brows. "This isn't natural debris," he said, his voice calm but tinged with caution. "It's a warship, and it looks abandoned." His second-in-command, Lorraine, leaned closer to examine the scans. Her large, multifaceted eyes glimmered with intrigue. "Abandoned, or perhaps booby-trapped," she replied, her tone cautious. "We should proceed carefully." Valus nodded. He signaled for 2 drones to be deployed. These machines, sleek and insect-like, zipped out of the ship and approached the derelict craft. Through their cameras, the Krillith watched as the drones circled the massive vessel, scanning every inch of its exterior. The ship's name, written in bold letters along its side, caught their attention: Aegis Dawn. Though none of them could read human script, the angular shapes intrigued them. When the drones finally located an airlock, they used precision lasers to cut through the thick metal door. Inside, the interior was dark, lit only by the dim glow of emergency lights that still functioned after who knows how long. Dust floated lazily in the zero-gravity environment, and panels hung loosely from walls, wires dangling like exposed nerves. The place felt dead, silent except for the occasional creak of metal shifting due to temperature changes. But there was more. As the drones ventured deeper, they discovered rows of empty cabins, storage rooms filled with strange supplies, and corridors lined with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly. In the main control room, consoles displayed frozen screens, some showing maps of star systems, others displaying fragmented data logs. One screen even showed a looping video of a humanoid figure speaking urgently, though the language was incomprehensible. Back aboard their own ship, the Krillith crew gathered around the monitors, watching the footage transmitted by the drones. Captain Valus crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "Whoever these beings are, or were, they are highly advanced," he murmured, "and dangerous. Look at the weaponry schematics stored here. Plasma cannons, missile launchers, devices we've never seen before." Liren tilted her head, studying the images closely. "Do you think they're still out there?" she asked softly. "Or did they destroy themselves?" Valus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the screen, his mind racing. Something about this discovery unsettled him, not just because of the technology or the ominous signs of battle, but because of what it implied. If such a powerful species existed somewhere in the galaxy, then the Krillith weren't alone. And if they weren't alone, what did that mean for their future? For now, all they could do was keep exploring. But as the drones continued their search, uncovering more secrets buried within the Aegis Dawn, one thing became clear: whoever had built this ship wasn't ordinary. They were survivors, warriors, and maybe, just maybe, they were still watching. The thought sent a chill through the entire crew. The Krillith team worked tirelessly, their sleek, multi-limbed forms moving with precision as they analyzed the data retrieved from the Aegis Dawn. The drones had brought back fragments of the ship's systems, damaged consoles, broken weapons, and pieces of technology that defied immediate understanding. Captain Valus stood at the center of the lab, his glowing eyes scanning the scattered components. His crew buzzed around him, their voices filled with awe and unease. "This is unlike anything we've encountered," said Lorraine, holding up a small device no larger than her palm. It hummed faintly, emitting a soft blue light. "It's some kind of energy core, but it doesn't match any known power source in our database." Valus nodded slowly. "And yet, it's clearly functional. Look at these markings on the casing. They're deliberate, precise. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing." As the hours passed, the Krillith began piecing together the puzzle. They discovered schematics etched into the walls of the control room, intricate diagrams depicting weapons far beyond their own capabilities. One design showed a massive cannon capable of firing concentrated plasma bursts. Another detailed a network of autonomous drones designed to repair the ship mid-battle. The sheer ingenuity left them stunned. But it wasn't just the hardware that fascinated them. It was the software. Buried within the ship's central AI core, they found remnants of programs that simulated combat scenarios. These simulations depicted humanity fighting against overwhelming odds, using clever strategies and relentless determination to turn the tide. In one scenario, a single human warship lured an entire enemy fleet into a trap, destroying them with a chain reaction of explosions. "They fight differently than us," muttered Engineer Treelan, his voice tinged with admiration. "They don't rely solely on numbers or firepower. They adapt. They improvise." Lyrian leaned closer to the monitor displaying the simulations. Her antennae twitched slightly, a sign of deep thought. "It's almost chaotic," she said. "But there's a method to it, a madness that works." What unnerved the Krillith most, however, was the realization that humanity seemed to thrive in chaos. The simulations weren't just about winning battles. They were about surviving when all hope seemed lost. Ships limping home with half their crew dead. Soldiers armed with nothing but makeshift tools holding off superior forces. Even in defeat, humanity refused to give up. Captain Valus paced back and forth, his tail flicking nervously. "This isn't just technology," he said finally. "This is philosophy. Their way of thinking. Their mindset. They don't see failure as final. To them, it's just another obstacle to overcome." The discovery sent ripples through the crew. For a species like the Krillith, who prided themselves on logic and order, this approach was both alien and unsettling. How could such unpredictability lead to success? And why did it feel so dangerous? Their unease grew when they stumbled upon something even more alarming: a series of self-repair protocols embedded in the ship's structure. Tiny machines, barely visible to the naked eye, scurried across damaged panels, welding tiers shut and replacing burnt-out circuits. The Krillith called them nanobots, though none of them fully understood how they worked. What they did know was that if a ship could heal itself in the middle of battle, then humanity's resilience wasn't limited to their minds. It extended to their machines as well. By the end of the day, the lab was cluttered with notes, diagrams, and half-assembled components. The Krillith had learned much about humanity's arsenal, but each answer only raised more questions. Who were these beings? What drove them to create such devastating tools? And most importantly, where were they now? As Valus stared at the glowing AI core, still humming softly despite its age, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Perhaps humanity already knew the Krillith were here. Perhaps they had left the Aegis Dawn as a message or a warning. Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain: humanity was not a species to be underestimated. As the Krillith delved deeper into the Aegis Dawn, their focus shifted from the ship's technology to its human occupants, or what remained of them. The crew had long since vanished, but traces of their presence lingered everywhere. Personal belongings were scattered across cabins, food packets floated in zero gravity, and faint scorch marks hinted at hurried repairs. Most haunting of all were the video logs, fragments of recordings left behind by the crew during their final days. The first log they managed to decode came from the captain, a stern-looking man with sharp features and piercing eyes. His voice was calm, but laced with urgency as he addressed his crew. "This is Captain Hayes. he began, standing in front of a cracked viewport that revealed the chaos outside. A battlefield filled with explosions and streaks of light. We're outnumbered and outgunned, but we hold the line. Evacuate non-essential personnel immediately. Prepare for emergency protocols. The Krillith watched silently, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the screen. To them, this was more than just a recording. It was a glimpse into the psyche of an entirely different species. Captain Valus tilted his head, studying the human's expression. "He's preparing to sacrifice himself," he murmured. "Why would he do that?" Lorraine, sitting nearby, adjusted the playback settings to enhance the audio. "Because it's necessary," she replied softly. "Listen to him. He's not just giving orders, he's inspiring them." The next log showed engineers working frantically in the engine room. Sparks flew as they welded broken pipes, their faces smeared with grease and sweat. One engineer, a young woman with dirt-streaked cheeks, spoke directly to the camera. "If anyone finds this, tell Command we did everything we could. The reactors are failing, but we've rigged auxiliary systems to buy time. Maybe, just maybe, they'll make it out alive." Her words trailed off as she turned back to her work, hammering away at a stubborn panel. The Krillith crew exchanged uneasy glances. These humans weren't just fighting. They were holding on by sheer willpower, refusing to give up even when the odds were insurmountable. Another log depicted a medic tending to wounded soldiers in a makeshift infirmary. Bandages floated in the air, and blood droplets hung suspended like tiny red orbs. Despite the grim surroundings, the medic's voice remained steady. "I don't care what Command says. We're staying until the last man is treated. If we abandon them now, then what's the point of all this?" The Krillith found themselves captivated by these glimpses of humanity. Each log painted a picture of a species driven by something beyond logic or survival instinct. It was emotion, raw, unfiltered, and powerful, that fueled their actions. Fear, anger, loyalty, and hope intertwined in ways the Krillith struggled to comprehend. "What drives them?" asked Engineer Treelan, breaking the silence. "Why fight so hard when there's no chance of winning?" Captain Valus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about winning," he said slowly. "It's about enduring, about refusing to let despair take over. To them, every second counts, even if it's futile." But not all the logs were heroic. Some revealed cracks in humanity's armor. In one particularly chilling entry, a soldier sat alone in a dark corner, his face buried in his hands. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going. We've lost too many. Friends, comrades, everyone's counting on me, but I'm scared. What if I fail? What if it's all for nothing?" The raw vulnerability shocked the Krillith. They prided themselves on emotional control, viewing emotions as distractions that clouded judgment. Yet here was a species that embraced its fears, using them as fuel to push forward. By the time the logs ended, the Krillith crew sat in stunned silence. They had uncovered more than just data. They had uncovered the soul of humanity, a species capable of incredible courage, boundless determination, and crushing vulnerability. And though the Aegis Dawn was silent now, its echoes of desperation lingered, leaving the Krillith with an unsettling question. If these humans could endure such horrors, what would they do when faced with a new threat? Valus stared at the frozen image of Captain Hayes, his mind racing. For the first time, doubt crept into his thoughts. Perhaps finding this ship wasn't just a discovery, it was a warning. The Krillith team had grown accustomed to the eerie silence of the Aegis Dawn, but as they ventured deeper into its labyrinthine corridors, a strange sensation began to creep over them. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but an unsettling awareness that something hidden lurked within the ship's walls. Their scanners picked up faint electromagnetic pulses emanating from one section of the vessel, pulses inconsistent with any known technology aboard. The source was located in a sealed compartment near the armory, a place untouched by their drones until now. Captain Valus ordered the drones to cut through the reinforced door guarding the compartment. Sparks flew as their precision lasers worked methodically, carving through layers of metal. When the door finally gave way, the room beyond was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of the drone's lights. Inside, mounted on a pedestal, sat a device unlike anything the Krillith had ever seen. It was small, no larger than a crate, but its design was alien even to human standards. Sleek and angular, it pulsed with a faint, irregular rhythm, as though alive. Strange symbols etched into its surface glowed dimly, shifting colors between red, blue, and green. Wires snaked out from its base, connecting it to what appeared to be a dormant power source. The air around it seemed charged, making the fine hairs on the Krillith's sensitive appendages stand on end. "What is this?" Lorraine whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the device. She extended a sensor-equipped limb toward it, hesitating just inches away. "It's unstable." Valus stepped closer, his tail flicking nervously. "Scan it," he ordered, his tone sharp. "But carefully. If this thing is emitting those pulses, it could be dangerous." The drones hovered cautiously, extending their analytical tools. Initial readings were inconclusive, but one detail stood out. The device appeared to manipulate matter at a molecular level. Early simulations suggested it could destabilize atomic bonds, effectively disintegrating anything it targeted. To the Krillith, the implications were horrifying. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool of annihilation. Engineer Trillin adjusted his visor, studying the data streams flooding his console. "If this works as intended," he trailed off, his voice trembling slightly, "it could destroy entire fleets, planets, even." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had already uncovered evidence of humanity's ingenuity, but this discovery pushed their understanding to the brink. What kind of species would develop such a devastating weapon? And why leave it behind on a derelict ship? As they continued their analysis, fragments of information began to emerge from the surrounding systems. Logs buried deep within the ship's archives hinted at the device's purpose. Dubbed Project Requiem in fragmented English text, it was described as a last resort measure, a fail-safe designed to ensure the Aegis Dawn would never fall into enemy hands. In the event of imminent capture or destruction, the crew could activate the weapon, obliterating themselves along with anyone foolish enough to pursue them. "This isn't just a deterrent," Lirin said, her antennae twitching rapidly. "It's a statement, a warning to anyone who dares challenge humanity." Captain Valus clenched his mandibles, his mind racing. The Krillith prided themselves on their logical approach to conflict. War, to them, was a calculated exchange of resources and strategy. But this was something else entirely. Humanity didn't just fight. They embraced ruin if necessary. Sacrifice wasn't just an option for them. It was a philosophy. And yet there was no sign that the weapon had ever been used. Why leave it intact? Was it truly abandoned, or was it bait, a trap waiting to spring? Trillin broke the tension. "We should dismantle it," he suggested, his voice firm despite his unease. "Study it in controlled conditions. If we can understand how it works, maybe we can replicate it, or defend against it." Valus hesitated. There was something about the device that felt wrong, as though tampering with it might awaken a sleeping beast. But curiosity outweighed caution. Humanity's secrets were too valuable, and too dangerous, to ignore. "Proceed," he said finally, though his eyes lingered on the pulsing artifact. "But remember, if this thing activates, we may not have time to regret our decision." As the Krillith began dismantling the device, none of them noticed the faint shift in its rhythm, a subtle change that suggested it was aware of their presence. The Krillith team had barely begun dismantling the mysterious weapon when another discovery redirected their focus. While cataloging the ship's combat records, Engineer Trillin stumbled upon a cache of holographic projections stored deep within the Aegis Dawn's memory banks. These weren't just static images or simple logs. They were detailed recreations of battles fought by humanity, each one more intense and chaotic than the last. "Captain," Trellin called out, his voice tinged with both excitement and unease. "You need to see this." Valus joined him at the console, his glowing eyes narrowing as the first projection flickered to life. The room filled with a three-dimensional battlefield, a swirling maelstrom of ships exchanging fire, explosions lighting up the void like fireworks. Human vessels darted between larger enemy craft, their movements erratic yet calculated. Missiles streaked across space, leaving trails of plasma in their wake, while fighter squadrons weaved through debris fields with breathtaking precision. "What is this?" Lorraine asked, her antennae twitching rapidly as she absorbed the scene. "It's beautiful and terrifying." "This isn't just a recording," Valus said, his tone low. "It's a simulation. Look, there are variables being adjusted in real time." He pointed to a series of numbers flashing on the side of the projection. "They're testing strategies, running scenarios over and over until they find what works." As the simulation progressed, the Krillith watched in stunned silence. Humanity's tactics were unlike anything they'd encountered before. Instead of relying on overwhelming force or rigid formations, human ships operated like predators, striking quickly, retreating, then striking again. They used terrain to their advantage, luring enemies into traps or exploiting weaknesses in their defenses. Even when outnumbered, they fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. But it wasn't just the ships that caught the Krillith's attention. Ground battles depicted in subsequent simulations were equally brutal. Soldiers armed with primitive-looking weapons engaged hordes of heavily armored foes, using cover, ambushes, and sheer determination to turn the tide. In one particularly harrowing scenario, a small group of humans held off an entire battalion by collapsing tunnels beneath their feet, burying them alive. "They don't play fair," Lorraine muttered, her voice filled with a mix of admiration and dread. "They break every rule we know about warfare." What shocked the Krillith most, however, was the realization that humanity didn't just fight external threats. They also fought themselves. One simulation showed two factions of humans locked in a bitter civil war, unleashing devastating weapons against each other. Cities burned, oceans boiled, and skies turned black with ash. The scale of destruction was unimaginable, yet neither side surrendered. Both fought to the bitter end, driven by ideologies so deeply ingrained that compromise seemed impossible. "These aren't just warriors," Valus said finally, his mandibles clicking softly. "They're survivors. But survival comes at a cost." The final simulation left the Krillith speechless. It depicted a lone human warship surrounded by an alien fleet far superior in size and firepower. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, the ship launched a desperate gambit, ramming itself into the enemy flagship, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction that annihilated both fleets. The projection ended with a single line of text flashing on the screen: "Victory through sacrifice." For a moment, no one spoke. The room was heavy with unspoken questions. What kind of species would willingly embrace such chaos? What drove them to push beyond limits others wouldn't dare cross? Lirin broke the silence. "If this is how they fight, how do we stand a chance?" Valus stared at the frozen image of the doomed warship, his mind racing. Humanity wasn't just dangerous. They were unpredictable. And unpredictability, he realized, was far more frightening than any weapon. As the holograms faded, one thought lingered in the air. If these were only simulations, what horrors awaited them in reality? As the Krillith team continued their exploration of the Aegis Dawn, they began to notice something peculiar about humanity's approach to warfare. It wasn't just the advanced technology or chaotic tactics that set humans apart. It was their emotions. Emotions, the Krillith had always believed, were distractions. They clouded judgment, led to irrational decisions, and ultimately weakened a species' ability to survive. Yet here, aboard this derelict warship, evidence suggested otherwise. The crew discovered personal files scattered throughout the ship, letters, journals, and audio recordings left behind by the human crew. These fragments painted a vivid picture of a species driven not by cold logic, but by raw, unfiltered feelings. Fear, anger, love, loyalty, all played a role in shaping their actions during battle. One recording, in particular, stood out. It was from a soldier named Marcus, his voice trembling as he spoke into what appeared to be a personal log. "I'm scared," Marcus admitted, his tone heavy with emotion. "Scared of dying. Scared of failing my team. But I keep telling myself, if we don't hold the line, who will? My family back home. They're counting on me. So, I'll fight, even if it kills me." The Krillith listened intently, their antennae twitching as they processed the words. To them, such vulnerability seemed like a weakness, yet there was an undeniable strength in Marcus's resolve, a determination born not from duty alone, but from love for those he sought to protect. Liren replayed the recording several times, her expression thoughtful. "This is fascinating," she said finally. "Their emotions don't hinder them. They fuel them. Fear becomes courage. Anger becomes focus. Love becomes sacrifice." Captain Valus nodded slowly, his mandibles clicking softly. "It's a paradox. We've always valued detachment because it allows us to think clearly. But these humans, they embrace chaos. They let their emotions guide them. And somehow, it makes them stronger." Further analysis revealed more examples of this phenomenon. In one journal entry, a medic described how her fury over losing patients pushed her to work harder, faster, refusing to let exhaustion slow her down. Another file contained a message from a pilot to his child, promising to return home safely no matter what. The sheer intensity of these emotions baffled the Krillith. How could such irrationality lead to success? To better understand, engineer Trillin cross-referenced the emotional data with the combat simulations they'd uncovered earlier. What he found was startling. In every scenario where humanity triumphed against overwhelming odds, there was a common thread: emotional stakes. Whether it was avenging fallen comrades, protecting loved ones, or fighting for survival itself, humanity's victories were fueled by deeply personal motivations. "This changes everything," Trellin said, his voice tinged with awe. "They don't win battles because they're smarter or stronger. They win because they care too much to lose." But the revelation came with a chilling implication. If humanity's emotions made them formidable warriors, then provoking those emotions could unleash untold destruction. The Krillith realized that facing humanity wouldn't just mean confronting their weapons. It would mean grappling with their passions, their pain, and their refusal to yield. Captain Valus stared at the frozen image of Marcus, the frightened soldier who vowed to fight anyway. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. The Krillith prided themselves on their logical superiority, but now he wondered, could logic truly prevail against a species that thrived on chaos? As the crew sat in silence, absorbing the weight of their discovery, Lorraine voiced what everyone was thinking. If we ever encounter them, we must tread carefully. Their emotions are their greatest weapon, and their greatest vulnerability. Valus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to the console, replaying Marcus's words once more. Humanity's psychological edge was both inspiring and terrifying. And deep down, he knew one thing for certain: underestimating them would be a fatal mistake. The Krillith fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their ships arrayed in a precise formation honed by centuries of disciplined warfare. Admiral Krylos led the charge, his flagship bristling with weapons reverse-engineered from humanity's designs. Behind him stretched a convoy of scout vessels, supply ships, and heavily armed cruisers, all prepared for the unknown. Yet as they approached Earth, their confidence began to waver. From the moment they entered the system, it was clear humanity had been expecting them. An immense orbital defense network encircled the planet, its satellites glowing faintly against the blackness of space. Energy shields shimmered like ghostly veils, protecting cities below from any potential threat. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the Krillith ranks. This wasn't just a defensive posture. It was a declaration. Before the fleet could react, every communication channel flared to life. A single message broadcast across all frequencies, spoken in flawless galactic standard, the universal language used by most advanced civilizations. "Welcome to our home," the voice said, calm but firm. "We've been expecting you." The transmission ended as abruptly as it began, leaving the Krillith fleet frozen in stunned silence. Captain Valus sat aboard his vessel, watching the holographic display flicker with static. He felt the weight of humanity's words settle over him like a storm cloud. They weren't just aware of the Krillith presence. They were ready. Admiral Krylos clenched his fists, his mandibles clicking furiously. "They're bluffing," he growled. "No species could anticipate us this thoroughly." But doubt gnawed at him, and everyone else. Humanity's ability to predict their arrival suggested something far more sinister. Perhaps the Aegis Dawn hadn't been abandoned at all. Perhaps it had been left deliberately, a lure designed to draw the Krillith into revealing themselves. If so, then everything they'd learned about humanity, their resilience, their ingenuity, their emotions, had been part of a larger plan. Back aboard Valus's ship, Lorraine stared at the glowing screens displaying Earth's defenses. Her antennae twitched rapidly as she processed the implications. "They let us find that ship," she whispered. "They wanted us to see what they're capable of. And now they're showing us the rest." Valus nodded grimly. "It's a gambit. They're testing us, to see if we'll fight or retreat." The decision weighed heavily on the Krillith leadership. Attacking would mean risking annihilation. Retreating would mean admitting weakness. For a species built on logic and order, the uncertainty was unbearable. Admiral Krylos hesitated, his usual decisiveness faltering under the pressure. Counselor Narayan urged caution, reminding them of humanity's warning aboard the Aegis Dawn. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness." As the standoff dragged on, humanity made no move to escalate. Instead, they simply waited, their orbital defenses glowing ominously in the distance. Every second felt like an eternity for the Krillith, each passing moment chipping away at their resolve. Finally, after hours of tense deliberation, Admiral Krylos issued the order: withdrawal. The fleet retreated silently, slipping back into hyperspace without firing a shot. It was a humiliating decision, but one born of necessity. Humanity's shadow loomed too large, their capabilities too uncertain. Back aboard Valus's ship, the crew sat in silence, the enormity of their failure sinking in. They had underestimated humanity, and paid the price. As they left Earth behind, Lorraine turned to Valus, her voice barely audible. "What happens now?" she asked. Valus stared out the viewport, his glowing eyes reflecting the fading light of Earth's sun. "Now," he said softly, "we prepare for when they come to us." For the Krillith, the encounter was a wake-up call. Humanity wasn't just a species, they were a force of nature. And though the Krillith had escaped this time, they couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's patience wouldn't last forever. Somewhere above Earth, humanity watched the alien fleet vanish into the void. Their message had been delivered and received, but peace wasn't guaranteed. In the vast expanse of space, shadows stretched long, and humanity's shadow was darker than anyone realized. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the next move. As the Krillith team delved further into the Aegis Dawn's archives, they uncovered something that sent ripples of unease through their ranks. Buried deep within the ship's database, encrypted in multiple languages, including one clearly intended for extraterrestrial recipients, was a message. It wasn't a distress signal or a plea for help. It was a warning. The message appeared on their screens as soon as they decrypted it, its words stark and deliberate. "To those who find us," it began, the text glowing faintly against the dark backdrop of the console. "You now know fragments of who we are. You have seen our weapons, our strategies, and perhaps even glimpses of our souls. Know this: we do not seek conflict, but neither do we fear it. We endure, we adapt, and if provoked, we retaliate without hesitation. The crew sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the screen. Captain Valus leaned forward, his mandibles twitching slightly as he read the final line. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness." Lirin broke the quiet first, her voice low and tense. This isn't random," she said. "They knew someone might find this ship. They left this message deliberately." Treelan adjusted his visor, scanning the metadata surrounding the file. "It's multilingual," he noted, "not just human languages. There are symbols and patterns here that don't match anything in their known systems. Someone designed this to be understood by others like us," Valus murmured, his tail flicking nervously. He stood up, pacing slowly across the lab. "This isn't just a relic of war. It's a statement. A declaration." The message raised more questions than answers. Why would humanity leave such a clear warning aboard a derelict ship? Were they trying to intimidate potential adversaries? Or was this an act of diplomacy, a way to communicate their strength while offering peace? The implications weighed heavily on the Krillith. If humanity had anticipated alien contact and prepared for it, they were far more advanced than anyone had assumed. This wasn't just a species stumbling blindly through the stars. They were proactive, strategic, and deeply aware of their place in the universe. "This changes everything," Lirin said finally, her antennae twitching rapidly. "If they left this message, then they're still out there, watching, waiting." Valus nodded grimly. "And they've already judged us." The realization struck the crew like a physical blow. Everything they'd discovered aboard the Aegis Dawn, the advanced technology, the chaotic combat strategies, the emotional resilience, wasn't just a snapshot of humanity's past. It was a blueprint of their future. Humanity wasn't merely reacting to threats. They were anticipating them. Leaving the derelict ship behind could have been a test, a way to gauge how other species would respond to their presence. "What do we do now?" Treelan asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Do we report this to the collective? Do we try to make contact?" Valus hesitated, his mind racing. Reporting their findings meant alerting the entire Krillith leadership to humanity's existence, a decision that could spark panic or even war. But ignoring the discovery felt equally dangerous. Humanity's message made one thing clear: they weren't afraid to defend themselves. "We proceed cautiously," Valus said finally, his tone firm. "We'll analyze every byte of data from this ship before we act. Until we understand exactly what we're dealing with, no one outside this team learns about this message or the weapon." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. They all felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. Humanity wasn't just a species to study. They were a force to reckon with. As the Krillith returned to their work, the message lingered in their minds, its words echoing like a challenge. Deep down, they knew they couldn't ignore it. The question wasn't whether humanity would meet them, it was when. And when that moment came, the Krillith would need to decide. Were they ready to face a species that thrived on chaos and defiance? For now, the Aegis Dawn remained silent, its secrets waiting to be unraveled. But somewhere out there, humanity was watching and preparing. The discovery of humanity's hidden message aboard the Aegis Dawn sent shockwaves through the Krillith collective. Captain Valus and his crew had transmitted their findings back to their homeworld, believing it was too significant to keep contained. What they hadn't anticipated was the speed at which panic would spread. Within hours of receiving the report, the Krillith leadership convened an emergency council. Holographic projections of key figures flickered above the assembly chamber: scientists, military strategists, and diplomats, all debating what to do about humanity. The message from the derelict ship loomed over them like a shadow. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness." Military commanders were the first to speak. Admiral Krylos, a towering figure with iridescent armor, slammed his fist on the table. "This is a threat," he declared, his voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "They've left us a warning intentionally. They're testing us. If we show hesitation, they'll see it as vulnerability. Others disagreed. Counselor Naren, a diplomat known for her calm demeanor, raised a delicate limb to silence the murmurs. "We don't know their intentions yet," she countered. "Their message doesn't say they seek war. It says they'll retaliate if provoked." That sounds like diplomacy to me. Perhaps they're offering peace, not conflict. But logic couldn't quell the growing paranoia among the populace. News of humanity's existence leaked quickly, spreading across communication networks like wildfire. Rumors swirled about humanity's rumored doomsday weapons and their willingness to sacrifice everything to survive. Some whispered that humanity might already be monitoring the Krillith fleet, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Fear began to erode the collective's usual composure. Citizens who once prided themselves on rationality now spoke in hushed tones about humanity's unpredictability. Public forums buzzed with speculation. Could humanity wipe out entire planets? Would they enslave other species? Were they even aware of how dangerous they seemed? Even within the scientific community, opinions fractured. Dr. Zinara, one of the foremost experts on alien civilizations, argued passionately during a live broadcast. Humanity isn't just another species, they're survivors. Their adaptability makes them both fascinating and terrifying. But fear shouldn't dictate our actions. We must learn more before deciding whether they're friend or foe. Her words fell on deaf ears. Panic overshadowed reason, fueling calls for preemptive action. Military factions pushed for immediate mobilization, urging the construction of new fleets armed with reverse-engineered technology salvaged from the Aegis Dawn. Others demanded reconnaissance missions to locate Earth and assess humanity's current capabilities. Meanwhile, Captain Valus and his crew faced mounting pressure. Orders poured in from every corner of the collective, each contradicting the last. One directive instructed them to destroy the derelict ship to prevent further exposure. Another ordered them to preserve it as evidence. Caught between conflicting commands, Valus made an executive decision. They would continue analyzing the Aegis Dawn, extracting as much data as possible while keeping its location classified. Back aboard their vessel, the crew worked tirelessly, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Lorraine spent long hours staring at the holographic projection of humanity's message, her antennae twitching nervously. What if they're already watching us? She asked aloud one evening. What if finding this ship wasn't an accident? Valus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gazed out the viewport at the Aegis Dawn, its battered hull floating silently in the void. For all their technological superiority, the Krillith suddenly felt small, like prey stumbling into a predator's den. As paranoia tightened its grip on the collective, one truth became clear. Humanity had changed everything. Whether through intention or coincidence, they had planted a seed of doubt in the Krillith psyche, a reminder that survival wasn't guaranteed, no matter how advanced a species believed itself to be. And somewhere out there, humanity waited, their next move unknown. The Krillith Collective was no stranger to challenges, but humanity's existence posed a question they had never faced before. How do you prepare for an enemy that thrives on unpredictability? The Council's debates had grown increasingly heated, with factions divided between diplomacy and aggression. Admiral Krylos pushed for immediate action, arguing that waiting would only give humanity time to strengthen their defenses. Counselor Naren, however, urged caution, warning that provoking humanity could lead to catastrophic consequences. Caught in the middle, Captain Valus found himself torn. His crew aboard the exploration vessel had become the de facto experts on humanity, and their findings were shaping the collective strategy. Whether they liked it or not, every piece of data extracted from the Aegis Dawn painted a clearer picture of humanity's capabilities, but also deepened the mystery surrounding their intentions. Under mounting pressure, the Krillith leadership authorized a dual approach: reconnaissance and militarization. A fleet of scout ships was dispatched to locate Earth, tasked with gathering intelligence while avoiding detection. Meanwhile, engineers worked around the clock to reverse engineer technology salvaged from the derelict warship. Plasma cannons, nanobot systems, and fragments of Project Requiem. The mysterious weapon were dissected and studied in secret labs hidden beneath the surface of the Krillith homeworld. But progress came at a cost. The more the Krillith learned about humanity, the more uncertain they became. Early tests on the plasma cannons revealed flaws in their initial designs, forcing engineers to rethink their assumptions. Attempts to replicate the nanobots' self-repair mechanisms resulted in unstable prototypes that disintegrated under stress. And as for Project Requiem, its core remained impenetrable, a silent enigma pulsing faintly on its pedestal, refusing to yield its secrets. Captain Valus watched these efforts unfold with growing unease. He knew the Krillith prided themselves on their efficiency and logic, but humanity defied those principles. Their weapons weren't just tools, they were extensions of their chaotic mindset. Could the Krillith truly harness such technology without understanding the emotions that fueled it? "We're playing catch-up," Lorraine said one evening, her voice heavy with frustration. She sat hunched over a console, reviewing schematics of human fighter formations. "Every step we take, they've already taken 10. What if we're too late?" Valus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the viewport, where the Aegis Dawn floated silently against the backdrop of stars. Its scars told stories of battles fought and survived. But its silence hinted at something far more ominous. If humanity had left this ship behind as bait, then what awaited them next? To complicate matters further, reports from the scout fleet began trickling in. And they weren't encouraging. Earth's orbital defense network was far more advanced than anticipated, bristling with satellites armed with energy shields and long-range weaponry. Recon drones sent to probe deeper were intercepted and destroyed within moments, leaving the Krillith scrambling to adjust their calculations. "They're ready for us," Trellin muttered grimly, analyzing footage of Earth's defenses. "They knew we'd come." Valus clenched his mandibles, his mind racing. Humanity wasn't just reactive. They were proactive. Leaving the Aegis Dawn hadn't been an accident. It had been a calculated move to lure the Krillith into revealing themselves. Now, humanity held all the advantages: knowledge of their opponent, superior preparation, and home field advantage. As preparations continued, paranoia reached a fever pitch among the Krillith populace. Families stocked up on supplies, fearing the worst. Military drills became commonplace, with fleets practicing maneuvers designed to counter human tactics. Yet beneath the surface, doubt lingered. Were they strong enough to face humanity head-on, or were they walking into a trap? One night, as Valus reviewed the latest intel, Lorraine approached him, her antennae twitching nervously. "What happens if we lose?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his glowing eyes reflecting the dim light of the console. "Then we'll learn what humanity already knows," he replied. "How to endure." In the shadows of uncertainty, the Krillith prepared for battle. But deep down, they couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was always one step ahead.